Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Now, I am talking about Kaijus today, don't worry about it, but to really get into why they're so important, I need to take a bit of a detour and talk about some of the history of game design in Yu-Gi-Oh!, specifically in regards to boss monsters. Though they make up a huge part of the game's formula nowadays, that wasn't always the case. While the allure of big boss monsters that champion your deck like Dark Magician or Blue Eyes White Dragon has always been with us, early competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Was defined more by small groups of monsters with loosely associated effects that generated a lot of value. Take Dead Rat from the old GOAT format days. Sure, the deck has payoffs, but Ryukoki and Vampire Lord don't really apply pressure to your opponent outside their stat line, besides some specific situations. The rest of the deck is made up primarily of problem solvers like Exiled Force, a catch-all piece of monster removal, or if your opponent was on something like their own Vampire Lord, you could get Injection Fairy Lily to run it over by battle. But, as with most games, power creep set in. These loosely associated groups of monsters would turn into archetypes, allowing their power level to rise without spilling over and becoming staples for every deck. And the payoff monsters would change from being big bodies with good stats to adding effects that would shake up the board state in big ways. Soon, every deck worth its salt would have its own Blue Eyes White Dragon. But the problem was that not even the powerful engine of destruction had protection from removal, and said removal was getting better in every set. However, that wouldn't last for long. Protection from targeting, battle destruction, and effect destruction evolved from being the effects of fragile equipped cards like Heart of Clear Water to being built right into the format's most fearsome threats. Last Warrior from Another Planet was already ridiculous, but what if a single Smashing Ground was no longer enough to deal with it, like El Shaddoll Winda? On top of that, bosses were getting even easier to make. Sure, Dark Armed Dragon was strong, but why spend all that time getting it into your hand and setting up your grave, when you could just slap a Zodiac on board and make Dryden on the cheap? So, in a world where increasingly powerful, resilient, and efficient monsters ruled the realms of Yu-Gi-Oh!, we had but one answer to call upon: Lava Golem. And so, premiering in the August 2015 core set, Clash of Rebellion, Kaijus would take the framework provided by cards like Lava Golem and Volcanic Queen and turn them into the bane of decks trying to anchor a board with one single powerful boss, showing the opposition what happens to their grand plans after you remove a single Jenga block. They may not be particularly good as their own deck, but they've undeniably had a huge impact on the game's design and direction. So, without further ado, let's cover everyone's favorite tech picks. It's time for Kaiju
Cease, mortal.
Oh no, what ancient creature did I manage to piss off this time?
Hey Nova, how's it going?
Oh, thank goodness. Folks, let me introduce you to Moai of Knowledge, artist, streamer, record of all human history, and, as it turns out, Yu-Gi-Oh! Enthusiast. How's it going?
I can't complain.
Could have fooled me. You were shaking this place up so much I thought you'd knock us out of orbit.
Well, you were slandering Kaiju's ability as a standalone deck.
What? No, you're pulling my leg. Everyone knows you only play Kaijus for the Slumber Access and Free Towers removal. You know what? I see your point. How about this? I'll go ahead and get everyone familiar with all the cards, then you can show everyone exactly what Kaijus can do.
That sounds like a plan. Everyone get ready to hear about Yu-Gi-Oh's greatest giant monsters. It's time for Kaiju Explained.
Hey, that's my line! So, what's the deal with Kaijus? Well, they're a series of monsters of varying types, attributes, and levels that all take inspiration from famous kaiju, generally the ones associated with Toho's Godzilla. They also share a series of effects. First off, you can special summon this card to your opponent's side of the field in attack position by attributing one monster they control. This is not an effect, so it doesn't start a chain. This also means that anything short of tribute immunity protects monsters from being kaiju'd. It is, for lack of a better term, an inherent summon. And if your opponent controls a kaiju monster, you can special summon this card from your hand in attack position. A circumstance you can orchestrate by Kaijuing one of your opponent's monsters. This is cool because you can actually play a decent number of Kaijus in your deck, and even if you draw multiples, you can actually convert extras into field presence for yourself. However, players can only control a single Kaiju monster, not one of each name, a single kaiju. Mechanically, this helps keep anyone from just polymorphing an entire field into different monsters. You have to use them specifically and deliberately, and it also keeps you from giving your opponent a single kaiju, then vomiting a bunch of high attack monsters to your side of the field for free. It also works flavor-wise, as it does get a little messy when you start introducing 3 or more kaijus into your movie. They really just end up being a third wheel. They also all have a unique effect that requires the consumption of kaiju counters, something that the monsters themselves aren't actually able to generate. For that, you're gonna have to rely on a number of kaiju spell and trap cards that do, and this creates a strange variable power level for these monsters. Without counters, they're basically gigantic vanillas after they hit the field. If you want to commit to actually using their effects, you have to invest a bit more, but be careful because they draw kaiju counters from either side of the field. So if you want to unlock the extra power of your kaijus, your opponent is going to have just as much access to them, so you'll need to be careful about which monsters you gift and which ones you keep for yourself. Alright, enough of the preamble, let's get into the monsters. Kumongus, the sticky string kaiju, is a level 7 earth insect monster with 2400 attack and 2500 defense, based on the giant spider kaiju Kumonga. When your opponent normal or special summons any number of monsters, you can remove 2 kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, and until the end of the next turn, those monsters can't attack and have their effects negated. This isn't once per turn, so as long as there are available counters, you can keep stunning monsters on summon. This is less effective against monsters that are solely meant to be a bridge into other monsters as material, so it's advised you spend your counters only on the more high impact effects. But even if you don't use Kumongus' stun ability, it still has a lot of great uses. As one of the weaker kaijus, it's a prime candidate to give to your opponent, and its level 7 status makes it one of the premium options for Kashtira if kaijuing becomes relevant in any format it's in, especially if they find themselves lacking enough material to make their Xyz, since Kumongus can help them out of that sticky situation. Radian, the multi-dimensional kaiju, is a level 7 Dark Fiend monster with 2800 attack and 2500 defense, and it's based on, well, the Wikipedia article says it draws from a lot of influences, but the most prominent is Dark Lugiel from the Ultraman series. And I have to say, the only monster that's an Ultraman reference in a Godzilla-based theme being the interdimensional kaiju is a nice touch. Once per turn, you can remove 2 kaiju counters from anywhere on the field to special summon a Radian token, which has all the same stats as Radian except for that 0 defense, a clever nod to them being fake clones. The token also can't be used as synchro material. This seems a little specific, but it also has another subtle restriction. Because it's a token, you can't inherently use it as Xyz material. However, you're free to use it as fusion material, if you're possessed of some funny combo, or more likely, as link material. Radiant is a great way to push for damage, as it can effectively double the amount of attack it contributes to the board, and since the token isn't a kaiju itself, it thankfully won't conflict with that restriction. It's also another level 7, so expect to see it in the aforementioned Kashtira decks alongside Kumongus, because kaijus always work best in pairs. Even if you don't play this alongside kaiju counters, it's got an impressive stat line that can defeat a wide range of opponents, but using the counters adds a whole new dimension to the strategy. Dogaran, the Mad Flame Kaiju, is a level 8 fire dinosaur monster with 3000 attack and 1200 defense, and is based on the king of monsters themselves, Godzilla. Once per turn, you can remove 3 kaiju counters from anywhere on the field to destroy all monsters your opponent controls, but this card can't attack the turn you activate this effect. That's right, you've got a walking Raigeki that sadly won't be able to take advantage of a clear field the turn you nuke it, but does leave the door open to any non-kaijus you may have, as this doesn't prevent you from attacking with anything else. And despite its gigantic attack stat, it's also one of the safer options to give to your opponent if you brought kaiju counters into the mix, as the board wipe is not a quick effect, so as long as you can deal with Dogaran before the end of your turn, you're clear to go. Its stat line also lends itself to some funny synergies. Being a fire monster means you can recycle this with Salaman Great Sunlight Wolf, though you won't be able to use it as a polymorph that turn, or you can search it with Soul Eating Oviraptor to help out problem monsters in Dino decks. Not to mention that being a level 8 also makes it a prime target for rank 8 plays. Let's just say that the Mad Flame Kaiju lends itself to a lot of mad scientist brews. Godarla, the Mystery Dust Kaiju, is a level 8 wind insect monster with 2700 attack and 1600 defense, and is based largely on Mothra. Once per turn, during either player's turn, you can remove 3 Kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, and the attack and defense of all other monsters on the field become halved. Ooh boy, this does not play well with others. Since it doesn't preclude your own monsters, just everything that isn't Godarla, anything you have out to support this big bug is gonna get shrunk. And unlike its spider companion Kumungus, this debuff is not temporary, so good luck with that. Still, a giant board-wide debuff like that is really useful, and with access to counters, makes Godarla the biggest threat in battle against any other kaiju. Heck, it's a bigger threat than most other monsters, period. But that's also what makes it the most dangerous to share while counters are available. But while it's just acting as a vanilla, it makes for a great inclusion in decks like B-Trooper, who can utilize Godarla's various characteristics for a number of their effects, while also getting past Stormwinds, which Kumungus isn't exactly fit to handle, though don't count that out as another pick for that deck either. But I've gotta say, all that dust is gonna wreak havoc on the resale value, and I don't even know where all this dust came from.
Hey, Ron. Hey, Billy.
Gameciel, the sea turtle kaiju, is a level 8 water aqua monster with 2200 attack and 3000 defense, and is based on Gamera. When your opponent activates a card or effect, except Gameciel, the sea turtle kaijus, as a quick effect, you can remove 2 kaiju counters from anywhere on the field to negate the activation, and if you do, banish that card. Yeah, Gameciel is a non-once per turn omni-negate that banishes. So, as long as you can keep the counters flowing, you can lock your opponent out of just about anything, especially if you can manage to get this thing into defense position where it's a bit more secured. But strangely enough, despite how busted Gameciel is, its one weakness is its greatest asset when it comes to being used as removal, because 2200 is the lowest attack stat of any of the kaijus, and because of this, usually commands a higher price point than any of the others. Seriously, it wasn't uncommon to see singles go from anywhere between $5 to $8 as a rare, just because it was the easiest to run over in battle. It's so funny to see a monster be valuable because, in a certain context, it's the worst of the entire theme. But when you bring kaiju counters into the mix, you better be ready, because this does a lot to raise the gamma ceiling of your deck. Thunder King, the Lightning Strike Kaiju, is a level 9 light thunder monster with 3300 attack and 2100 defense, and is based on the best monster of them all, King Ghidorah. Once per turn, you can remove 3 kaiju counters from anywhere on the field, and your opponent's cards and effects can't be activated for the rest of the turn. Also, this card can make up to 3 attacks on monsters during each battle phase this turn. Alright, now this one's a little saucy. Not only does it help out the rank 9 crowd with that valuable level, it's also one of the strongest kaijus available, and if you have the counters around, it's also got a multi-attack you can slap on there. But that's not all, because they just subtly added the fact that your opponent is no longer allowed to activate cards or effects for the rest of the turn, joining such illustrious company as S0 Zexal and Outer Entity Azathoth. So if this resolves, that means your opponent doesn't get any floating effects, no hand traps, no negation, nothing. You have full reign of that turn, and if your opponent has enough monsters to bully, then you could just go for game on the spot. Damn, 3 heads really are better than 1. Jizukiru, the star-destroying kaiju, is a level 10 light machine monster with 3300 attack and 2600 defense, and is based on another favorite of mine, Gigan. When a card or effect is activated that targets exactly 1 card and no other card, as a quick effect, you can remove 3 kaiju counters from anywhere on the field to negate that effect, and if you do, destroy a card on the field. And like Gameciel, this is not once per turn. This is a pretty interesting form of interaction that has some pretty tricky tactical uses. Normally, cards like this will negate and destroy the offending card, but here we can choose to redirect that destruction to any card we want. And traditionally, we would just have it pop any other card they control to take full advantage of it. But the funny thing is that it doesn't specify it only negates effects that target your cards, just cards that have a singular target. So if your opponent tries to buff anything and it targets, you can slap their hand away, then pop a card. It also doesn't say it can't negate your own cards, so you could potentially trade in a targeting effect of your own to make a non-targeting pop. I think it's also worth mentioning that this is tied with Thunder King as one of our biggest kaijus, so it's also no slouch when it comes to combat. But who's gonna tell them they're destroying a city right now and not a star? feels a little off-brand. Okay, that makes up the bulk of our kaijus, but we do have a couple that are a little out of left field. The Super Anti-Kaiju War Machines. These represent the mecha versions of our kaijus, presumably made by the human inhabitants of this world to fight back against the kaijus, like how they do in the movies. And that always goes well. They also have the usual templating to only allow you to have a single kaiju, but nothing else. First up is Super Anti-Kaiju War Machine Mecha Dogaran, a level 8 light machine monster with question mark attack and 2000 defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must first be special summoned from your hand while your opponent controls a kaiju monster. So I guess it kept that effect, but adds in the can't be normal summoned or set stipulation. It's also kinda disappointing because you can't give your opponent a 0 attack monster. Sad. Once per turn, you can remove 2 kaiju counters from anywhere on the field to equip a kaiju monster from your hand or grave to this card, and this card gains attack equal to the combined original attack of the kaiju monsters equipped to this card by this effect. Boy, I do not like this card. If it allowed you to equip a kaiju controlled by your opponent, this would be an entirely different story. But now you have to give your opponent a kaiju, then have another waiting in the wings to equip it to this one. Now, in its defense, while it's only once per turn, you can keep doing this every turn, meaning Mecha Dogaran could potentially become heckin' huge. The beefiest chonger you ever did see. Without the beef. But this card has far too many drawbacks to ever be an effective anti-kaiju tech. They'd have to rebuild this thing to be harder, better, faster, and stronger. Super Anti-Kaiju War Machine Mecha Thunder King is a level 9 light machine monster with 2200 attack and 2100 defense, and during the main phase, as a quick effect, you can discard this card to banish a kaiju monster you control that is owned by your opponent, then you can special summon one monster from your grave. This card is unaffected by other kaiju cards' effects, also it can't be destroyed by battle with a kaiju monster. And during your end phase, if this card is in your grave, you can special summon this card, but you can only use this last effect once per duel. Wow, that's a lot to unpack here. So, this really was advertised as a way to fight back against rampant kaiju use, as detailed in the official Konami blog. Its in-hand effect essentially works to undo the polymorph of your monster, banishing the gifted kaiju and replacing it with any monster from your grave. But since you can only do this with a kaiju that's owned by your opponent that's now on your field, it really only works if your opponent is playing kaijus, so you can't effectively build around this. That also pertains to its other effects, where it's unaffected by other kaiju cards, as well as resisting battle destruction from them. But because they didn't keep original Thunder King's gigantic attack stat, it's as small as Gameciel without any of the utility. The closest thing that's splashable about this card is the free once per duel revival, but since it triggers during your end phase, not just any end phase, it'll just sit on your field acting as a kind of anti-kaiju force field until your opponent gets rid of it with any decently sized monster. I mean, I hate to bring this up again, but like in the movies, these mechanized versions of old classics just aren't what the engineers expected. Though I do think it's funny that they cut its attack by a third because they replaced one of the heads with a shoulder-mounted cannon. That's actually kinda cool. Alright, that does it for the kaijus. Now it's time for the set dressing, the spells and traps, and we've got to start with Kyoto Waterfront, a field spell card that places a kaiju counter on itself each time any number of cards are sent from the field to the grave for every card sent, and can hold a maximum of 5. So if you play Regeki and hit 3 monsters, you get 4 counters. 1 for each monster sent to the grave, and the resolving spell card. Once per turn, while 3 or more kaiju counters are on this card, you can add a kaiju monster from your deck to your hand. And if this card would be destroyed by a card effect, you can remove a kaiju counter from this card instead. Yeah, so this card is bonkers, no two ways about it. Like I said earlier, this counts even if you activate a spell card and it goes to the grave, so each one of those gets you a little extra mileage when playing any consistency or utility cards. And it also rewards you for sending your opponent's cards from their field to the grave too. The search effect doesn't spend those counters, it just checks to see if you have at least 3, so you get to keep those to spend on your kaiju effects. And if you're in a bit of a pickle, these counters can be removed to shield it. Heck, if they hit this with a card like Mystical Space Typhoon or Twin Twisters, it actually refunds the counter because once those spells resolve, they go to the grave, and Kyoto gets a counter. But be careful because this is a bit of a double-edged sword, as it does allow your opponent to use any of the effects of kaijus you give them. I'm not trying to dissuade you from using this card, mind you, I just want to be upfront about it. Interrupted Kaiju Slumber is a normal spell card that destroys as many monsters on the field as possible, then special summons in attack position 2 Kaiju monsters with different names from your deck, 1 to each side of the field, but they can't change their battle position and must attack each turn if able. And during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the grave, you can banish this card from your grave to add a Kaiju monster from your deck to your hand. Now, if there was a card that was more instrumental for the widespread adoption of Kaijus, I don't know what it is. It's a dark hole that sets up any of your Kaijus except like mecha-godzilla, and you can just give your opponent the smaller one so you can run over it. And then you get to search another Kaiju the following turn to make sure you have another answer. This card doesn't do a whole lot of things, but what it does them exceptionally well. And to be fair, I'm the kind of person who'd knock over an entire table of cards if my 8 hours of sleep got interrupted, so I get it. The Kaiju Files is a continuous spell card that gains a Kaiju counter each time any number of Kaiju monsters are special summoned from the hand or grave, maximum 5. Once per turn, you can target a Kaiju monster on the field and destroy that monster, then special summon a Kaiju monster with a different original name from your deck to its controller's field. You can send this card with 3 or more Kaiju counters on it to the grave to add a Kaiju spell or trap card from your deck to your hand, except a copy of this card. I kinda get why this card exists. It effectively allows you to swap out either player's Kaijus for ones that are more agreeable, and it even gives you the choice of whether or not it'll be an attack or defense position. You can swap out a Dogoron that's used its board wipe effect to get an attacker that can actually do something, or trade out the Godarla you gave your opponent for a defense position Thunder King. It also acts as a free way to enable Jizukiru's destruction effect, because thankfully it won't destroy the Kaiju Files, you can just direct the destruction somewhere else. And having another way to stock up on Kaiju counters makes your Gameciel that much more deadly. But that being said, I don't know, it just feels underbaked. Only doing things once you've properly got some Kaiju set up, it doesn't actually help you get anywhere. The way it gains Kaiju counters is also pretty weird. While you can get counters aplenty by summoning Kaijus out of your hand, there isn't currently an on-theme way to special summon Kaijus from the grave, so it's, yeah, not very helpful. The search is also pretty limited. The field spell itself is not a Kaiju card, which only leaves 2 options: Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, which is a bop I suppose, and our next card, and I'll leave it up to you if you think that card is worth giving up a counter generator for it. Just to, file that information away for later. Kaiju Capture Mission is a continuous trap card, and once per turn, if there are 3 or less Kaiju counters on this card, you can target a Kaiju monster on the field and change it to face down defense position, then place a Kaiju counter on this card, maximum 3. And if this card in your possession is destroyed by an opponent's card and sent to the grave, you can draw 2 cards. That's pretty funny if I'm being honest, and I think that Abyss Actor players should run 3 of these. Okay, jokes aside, it is nice to have this as a kind of deterrent. After all, you never know what someone's gonna do when they draw 2. And I also like what this enables for the theme. By flipping a Kaiju monster face down, you'll be circumventing the built-in limitation of the archetype. You can Kaiju one of your opponent's monsters, flip it down to prevent it from using its effects, and essentially take a Kaiju off their board to potentially do it to them again. You can also use this on your own monsters, allowing you to flip down unneeded Kaijus to make room for others, at which point you can flip them up and down as needed. Just make sure you're spending those counters, otherwise this card is going to come to a screeching halt. Still, because this card does bend the rules of the theme, I'm sure it's captured the imagination of some duelists. Alright, that's all the Kaiju cards, but what do we do with them? Well, like I said previously, they're very good in formats where powerful singular monsters dictate the flow of the game. Oftentimes, the only way to effectively deal with cards like Red Eye's Dark Dragoon or Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer is to just turn him into a turtle, since it bypasses any form of protection and can't be responded to. A silly thing you can do is play Owner's Seal to take back any Kaijus you give to your opponent, but it's actually really bad if you already have a Kaiju, because then you're just gonna have to give up one of them since the game sees you control 2 Kaijus, which is a big no-no. I think a far more effective way to steal back your monsters is by playing them in a Relinquish deck. This guarantees that your rituals will be stacked with attack power while still getting the bonus of polymorphing your opponent's cards, and if you don't have the material on hand to put together a whole ritual, you do have a bunch of level 1s. See, since you're summoning the Kaijus, you get to pick which zone it's summoned to on your opponent's side of the board, so make sure you summon them in a zone just above the EMZ, then make Relinquished Anima, which will then proceed to slurp up that monster. This also makes Geonator Transverser a really neat option. You can give your opponent a big Kaiju, then creature swap one of your little tiny creatures to get back your big pet. But that's all the tech picks I've got on hand. Now I turn things over to the Kaiju Connoisseur. Moai, take it away.
Kaiju's primary strategy is all about securing Gameciel on board with counters to spare. Its powerful negation rivals the likes of Herald of Perfection, however Gameciel has the weakness of being the lowest attack Kaiju, which you need to compensate for by making sure the Kaiju you give your opponent isn't on board by the time your turn ends. Just by using the Kaiju cards themselves, this is done primarily by using Radiant's effect to summon a token, which can then be linked into Link Spider, and then linking that with Radiant to summon either Donner, Dagger for Hire to pop the Kaiju you gave your opponent after you summon Gameciel, or Underclock Taker, which you summon Gameciel beneath in order to run it over by battle. Both Link 2s have their pros and cons, but generally speaking, Donner is typically the better route. This Radiant setup can be achieved with just a Waterfront and a Slumber. Kaiju as a deck is often best paired with an engine since they lack any form of normal summon. A few options include Invoked, Fairy Tail Luna, which can bounce your own Kaijus given to your opponent, and my personal pick, the Psy Reflector engine. Psy Reflector wonderfully complements Kaijus by giving them big synchros that either help OTK, clear boards, or assist in protecting Gameciel. Access to the entire pool of generic 6 through 9 synchros, including some type and attribute locked ones with the help of Assault Sentinel, is a fantastic toolbox to complement your main plays with. To further complement these strategies, other tech options include Effect Veiler, a hand trap that also gives you synchro access, and to further complement these level 1 tuners, I opt to play Kinkabio, which can revive Psy Reflector for a fresh synchro play every turn, or utilize Veilers in your graveyard for Link or synchro access. One mandatory tech that I wouldn't play Kaiju without is Alpha, Master of Beasts. This card may as well have been a Kaiju card in everything but name, as its ability to bounce Kaijus given to your opponent, as well as being a big body and having the level for potential rank 8 plays, is nothing short of phenomenal for the deck. I would not play any less than 3 in any build.
Thank you very much. And with all that sweet info under our belts, that's all I've got to say about Kaijus. The meta isn't very conducive to them right now, boards are getting a bit too complex for a single monster replacement to affect much, but I have faith that things will swing back around in no time, and we'll be giving our opponent rude awakenings and forcing them to turtle up just like the good old days.
Mid-pun. 4 out of 10.
What? Nah, that was choice. Besides, I make this my job, what do you know?
Honestly, considering what the monsters are based on, I thought you would pay more tribute to the classics.
Oh, hell, that is good. I'm gonna spend a bit of time trying to find a way to top that, but while you're waiting, make sure you go give Moai a follow. The insult to my punsmanship cuts deep, but after all that Kaiju knowledge, I guess they deserve it. And let us know down below what Kaijus are your favorite, and which ones you're hoping will get added in the future. Honestly, I'm kinda shocked they haven't called in Biolante for an audition. And while you're down there, be sure to like and subscribe. We're trying to hit 50k so we can do Akiza Explained, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander Green Knight, Nebula Navigator's 3rd Dynasty, Adam Zajdel, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Cameron Berg, Chibi Gohan, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba331, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iskander711, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Mana Charge, Marluxia is a Girl, Meteornus, Michael Madsen, Mighty Action X, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Rem T Bright, RJ the Jank Monarch, Ruxith Sarani, Sophie, apparently, the Charizard Flame, the Fresh Prince of Conair, the Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Ariel Kersey, Bear Shark Depot Studios, Chaz Ghost, Chris Kessler, Corbinisms, Danny Bound, Emily, Eva Padilla, Herbal D, Jesus Garcia, Kale the Dragon, Carp, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Matt Simmons, Neo Trinity 7, Nitromo, put a card trooper up my ass, call that a card trooper and ass sandwich, but Noah Gent calls it lunch, I vote for Ophion to be banned. Sarah Losulchi, Shooting Star 3300, Star-Lord 777, Super Purd, Tucker Ordorn, and the legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, and get all my videos just a little bit early, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you'd like to see another video about giant monsters, check out this video I made covering Subterrors. And if you'd like to bully me alongside a random number generator, check out Noah Jenk and I's latest series progression polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.